Winston Peters is in a world of hurt in New Zealand around donations. There's a lot of scandal around him in New Zealand. So, just like little brother wants to beat up on big brother as a distraction, right? Now we see this in state politics when premiers want to distract, they whinge at the federal government, states sort of fight in between each other. Rita bags South Australia, which I always think is unfair. But, you know, this practice happens here, there and everywhere, OK? Well, Winston Peters, as the Foreign Minister, is the chief diplomat of New Zealand. And he has not just ringingly endorsed the nonsense that Jacinda Ardern was saying at the front of the PM's house the other day, but goes even harder. He had a chat with Jackson Williams. You'll see a lot more of this tomorrow, but I've got to show a bit of this to you tonight. The chief diplomat, the NZ in Anzac, is this bloke.
Have a good hard look at the map of where you are in Australia and the surrounding countries and ask yourself, which country should you be on the best of terms if you possibly can be? And that country is New Zealand. We're old friends. We go back centuries in terms of our association. And this is one area where, sadly, we've got to be honest with each other and say what we don't like. And I'm happy to have a debate with them anytime they like.
Who with?
The whole lot of them.
The Prime Minister?
Yes, the whole lot. I was involved in politics a long time before Mr Morrison got involved in the game.
Was it disrespectful for the Prime Minister to travel to Australia and blast Scott Morrison while she was in his country as a guest?
Well, if you think that straight talking and plain talk is a matter that's...
Yeah, but this straight talk normally takes place behind closed doors. It's quite rare to see what we saw on Friday afternoon unfold in public.
Well, with respect, I've heard too many Australians, including Mr Dutton, making their comments, not behind closed doors, straight out front. And when you send serious criminals that we've never seen in this country over here, out of Australia, when their whole background is Australian in origin, it's plainly unfair.
Peter Dutton says Jacinda Ardern's comments were regrettable. She says his policy is regrettable. He has suggested that the Prime Minister is grandstanding on this issue ahead of the election. Is that what motivated her public outburst?
Well, my evidence against that is that I raised that last year with Foreign Minister in our Australian meetings in Australia. I raised it with Maurice Payne then. So he can't say that because it's simply chronologically incorrect.
Is it disrespectful then for him to say that, to suggest that the only reason Jacinda Ardern is publicly challenging the deportation policy is because of domestic politics here?
Oh, look, I could make the cheap shot myself and say this is one of the things that saw someone going to the Liberal Party caucus to become the leader. He knocked on the door and everybody said knock, knock, and the answer was, who's there? ScoMo, not Mr Dutton. This was his campaign ploy. I'm very much aware of that.
The chief diplomat of New Zealand. I don't know how New Zealand plans to retaliate. I know we're on air right now. G'day to everyone who's watching us there right now. But Winston Peters, well served as him as the Deputy Prime Minister, Troy. You quaking?
Well, I'm shaking in my boots with those kind of attacks coming from the junior alliance partner there. But look, I mean, we have lots of viewers in New Zealand, I know, but look, I think they're a little bit envious of Australia, and they've got an election coming up. And so they're trying to score a few points on Australian politicians who are generally from a different political colour than they are at the moment.
Correct.
And so you've got to see it in that context. Now, I mean, this whole issue about deportation has been covered, but it was extraordinary to see Jacinda Ardern tee off against the Prime Minister on the lawns of Kirribilli last week. Just pretty extraordinary stuff, actually rude to do that. And I don't have any particular problems with Jacinda Ardern, but it was rude. Let's call a spade a spade here. And look, I mean, we're going to be lectured to by New Zealand. Well, I don't think anyone here is going to be worried about that.
Mark, do you like this new form of diplomacy where the Foreign Minister can't remember the other Foreign Minister's name?
He lost me at knock knock.
Yeah, it was so weird. It was just odd, wasn't it, Rita? It was weird.
Yeah, it was odd, and he thinks he's got a gotcha moment because Peter Dutton challenged for the leadership and he didn't get it. Peter Dutton's challenge is the reason we don't have Malcolm Turnbull anymore. We don't have Bill Shorten as Prime Minister. So I would have thought that challenge worked pretty damn well. And he is our Home Affairs Minister. But it's extraordinarily entitled for the New Zealand Prime Minister to come to our country, try to dictate border protection and immigration policies here with the most nonsensical arguments. She's essentially saying there's two classes of New Zealand citizens. There's the genuine Kiwis, as she calls them, and the New Zealand citizens who aren't really citizens because they feel more Australian. Well, sorry, that's not how this works. It's not based on your feelings. It's whether you are a citizen or not. And if you're a non-citizen and you're a criminal, you'll be sent back to your home country, and in this case it's New Zealand. And you know what's worse about this whole thing is she's an absolute hypocrite. New Zealand is doing precisely the same thing, particularly sending criminals to the Pacific nations, Samoa, Fiji and a number of others. They've sent over 1,000 in the last 5 years, and many of them have also spent decades in New Zealand. They've got far bigger links in New Zealand than they do to the countries they're being deported to, and yet that's happening, and yet she feels like we're doing something wrong by implementing our laws. I just find the whole thing bizarre.
Well, that's all correct, but I do think it's time to let Dusty Martin's dad back into the country.
No.
He's been expelled for long enough. No, he's been on the bench a long, long while, and I can tell you there's plenty of people out Camden Way who want him back. And I had a good talk with his wife about it at Lumiere Station one day, and she convinced me.
Right.
Bring back Dusty's dad.
Well, I can tell you there's plenty of Richmond supporters who say Dusty has never played better since his dad was deported. So they want him to stay in New Zealand.
As a Giants supporter, bring back Dusty's dad.